Day and night and day, the living creatures give their praise to Him who lives eternally. They never cease from saying, Holy, holy is Yahweh Almighty, worthy, worthy to receive all glory.
Well, hello and shalom. Shalom to my friend Warwool and my friend Lee and James. Thank you guys so much for joining me. This was kind of an impromptu thing. I wasn't sure that I was doing it right now until this morning. So I've been working on this series, for the kings and the prophets. And it's amazing to me what all is coming out in it. And I hope you guys enjoy it near as much as I am enjoying it, because I'm just getting so much insight out of doing it. Hello, Betty. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. So I'm going to just jump right into it today. I've gone ahead and recorded the next 4 books in the series so that we can play it after we do this part of study together, and pray that it will be a blessing to you. And then it looks like where I'm going next on this would be into the book of Obadiah. And I'm very excited because doing it the way that I'm doing it, I'm seeing things I've never seen before. And it is really exciting to see where this is taking us. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and add my PowerPoint to the screen. Okay, so we are in part 4 of the introduction to Kings and Prophets. All right, so just kind of reviewing. I wanted to look at who we had. We started with Shaul, right? So this was a new thing. Other territories, other places had monarchies, but this was new for Israel. They were, they had been ruled by judges and leaders, but Yah was supposed to be their king, right? But they wanted to be like the other nations. So they got Shaul, then they got David, and then they got Solomon. So each of them had a 40-year reign. It's interesting to me because how when we see Yah repeat things in 2s or 3s, it's like he's just saying it really loud. And so here we get this period of 40 years repeated 3 times. And we know that the number 40 is a testing ground. It's why, they sinned and they were afraid to go take the promised land. They believed the bad report that came back from the spies, and there they had to go around the mountain again. Many times in Moses's life, we saw that period of 40 years. You just see that over and over. So it's a testing time. That 40-year period is always a test. All right, so then I kind of did this so that we can see, and I'll work with James and Lee and see if we can't end up making this into something that maybe we can put up on the website for future reference, right? Hello, Lolo. Glad you could join us too. So I've got up here, we're looking at the kingdom of Yehuda, right? So as we're looking at this is the Jews, right? The years of reign are an approximation. If you understand or saw my teaching before, when I explained how they counted the years, and sometimes they overlapped, like, if a king and a son overlapped, which you'll see in this portion we're covering today, then those years counted for both of them, or if they were being ruled at the moment by Assyria, then they had to switch back to Assyrian reckoning of years. It's really difficult to pinpoint years in this study. So everything that I've done when I've said, hey, they had an 18-year reign or a 3-year reign or 22-year reign, this is an approximation from the very best that I can figure out. So we look up here at the top, okay, and we're looking at the southern kingdom, Yehuda. And the first thing we notice is that they had 20 kings, right? So they start with Rehoboam. He had an 18-year reign. He was the son of an Ammonite woman. He was Solomon's son, but he came from an Ammonite woman. Shemaiah was the prophet that was active during his reign. Okay. Then his son, and see, you can kind of see it. Let me move that. If I've got the word son, it means that they're the son of the king that was before them. Okay. And that's how you can see how it came down. So we've got Abijam. He was a son reigning for approximately 3 years, and the prophet in charge was Shemaiah. Asa takes over. He has a 41-year reign. He is the son of Abijam. Shemaiah and Hanani are the prophets. Then we go to Jehoshaphat. He reigns for 22 years. He's the son of Asa. And the prophet in place at that time was then Hanani. Jehoram, he has a 7-year reign. He's the son of Jehoshaphat. Obadiah begins his ministry. Okay. Ahaziah has a 1-year reign. He is a son of Jehoram. Obadiah is the prophet. Athaliah has a 6-year reign. She is the mother of, I believe she was the mother of Ahaziah. Yes, she was the mother of Ahaziah, and I guess he died. So, or she was the mother of Joash. I'm not quite sure. We'll have to look at that. But as we read through, we'll have to really pay attention to that one. But she stood in place, and I would imagine she was probably Joash's mom, because she took over until her son could be on the throne, and he was the son of Ahaziah. Okay, is who Joash was. He reigned for 39 years, and Joel was the prophet while he was on the throne. Amaziah had a 29-year reign. He was the son of Joash, and Joel was the prophet. Azariah, also known as Uzziah, I'm probably butchering the names, but he had a 27-year reign. He was the son of Amaziah, and Isaiah and Micah had their ministry, their prophetic ministry during his reign. Jotham reigned for the next 15 years. He was the son of Uzziah. Isaiah and Micah were the prophets. Then comes Ahaz with a 15-year reign. He was the son of Jotham. Isaiah and Micah were the prophets. Hezekiah, a 28-year reign, the son of Ahaz. Isaiah and Micah were the prophet. Then we get Manasseh, a 44-year reign, the son of Hezekiah. Isaiah and Micah are the prophets. His son Ammon, Manasseh's son Ammon, reigns for 2 years. Isaiah and Micah are the prophets. Hosea has a 21-year reign. He was the son of Ammon. Now, during his reign, we get the prophets Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and we get the book of Lamentations. Okay, and so the prophets remain consistent now throughout the rest as we go forward. Who are the prophets? Here's the rest of the kings. Jehoahaz, he reigned for less than a year. He was the son of Joash. Joachim, a 10-year reign, son of Hosea. Jehoiachin, less than a year reign, son of Jehoiakim. Zedekiah, a 10-year reign, son of Hosea. I know it's absolutely really long, drawn out, complicated, lots of detail. So I'm hoping that what we're doing here helps us to get these things straight in our mind, because there's a lot to learn throughout these things. Okay, so now let's look at the difference of what we see between that list of 20 that happened in Judah. You can tell it all came down through sonship, all the way from David's line, coming down through David to Solomon. It came through that line, through the sons. Okay, very interesting how that worked in that kingdom. Now let's compare that to the northern kingdom and what happened. The first thing we see is we get a total of 19 kings, not 20. This whole reign took place, they had about 200 years. Now, if we look back on the other one, you can see in 486, we're looking at, I'm just giving an approximation here, about a 350 year time period here for these kings to reign. Their kingdom lasted another 150 years or so beyond what the kingdom of Israel lasted. Okay, so now here we are at the play of looking at Israel, Yisrael, however you want to say it. I go back and forth myself, right? The more that I try to look at the Hebrew. All right, so the years of reign are an approximation, again, like I was explaining, because of how things overlap. But let's look at how it started. So Jeroboam was not of the lineage of David's line. He was a servant in the army, okay? He ended up with this given to him by Yahweh because of Solomon's sin, okay? So he reigns for 22 years, and I've got Jeroboam number 1, because if you look down, the 13th king is Jeroboam number 2. So we've got 2 Jeroboams here, all right? So that's important to know. The prophets during his reign, Ahijah and Yadon. Okay, we're going to be talking about Yadon's story in a little while here. Nadab has a 2-year reign. He is the son of Jeroboam. So now we've got the succession, and the prophet is Ahijah. Why? Because Yadon has died, and you'll see that in the story. Then comes Baasha. He reigns for 32 years. He is just a commoner that rises up, and he's an assassin because he assassinates Nadab, right, in order to take the throne. Okay, so this is the type of stuff that you see is, instead of a line of succession of royalty that Yah picks out, then we've got strife, contention, fighting, murder, mayhem going on in this kingdom of the Israelites, right? In the northern kingdom. So Baasha the murderer, the assassin, takes the reign for 32 years. The prophet then at his reign is Jehu. Then we have Baasha's son, Elah. He has a 2-year reign. Okay. Part of that is combined with Baasha. So again, do we know that his reign was really 2 years? Do we know that it was actually 32? It was that 2 incorporated into the 32. That's what's really hard to determine. Okay. I just go by the fact of it. That's an approximation. And we know we had an approximate 200-year time frame for all this to happen. All right. So then we have Zimri take place. Well, Zimri was a captain in the army who murders Elah and takes the throne. Zimri actually, I've even looked at more study. It was not a 1-year reign at all. It was a 7-day reign, right? And you'll see that in the story. So I've got to fix this on my own sheet, because he only reigned for 7 days. Okay. The prophets there for him were Micaiah and Elijah. So we see Elijah start his prophetic ministry. Then we see Omri rise up, and he has a 10-year reign. He is another captain that kills Zimri, right? And he's elected by his fellow soldiers to become the next king, has a big civil war. We'll go into all that. Okay. Again, Micaiah and Elijah are the prophets. His son Ahab then arises to the throne, the famous Ahab and Jezebel, for a 21-year reign. So he's the son of Omri, and still Micaiah and Elijah are the prophets. Ahaziah is Ahab's son. He has a 2-year reign. The prophet is Elisha. Okay, so many miracles to talk about when we get there. Joram is the son of Ahab. So maybe Ahaziah didn't have any sons. He died before he could have sons. Anyway, Joram, another son of Ahab, takes the throne for 11 years. Elisha's the prophet. Jehu becomes the next king. He was a captain. See, and he was a captain in the army. He was described as this wild man, right? And he actually is the one who ends up dealing with Jezebel and killing her. He has a 27-year reign, and Elisha is the prophet. Jehoahaz has a 16-year reign. He is the son of Jehu. Elisha is still the prophet. Joash has a 17-year reign. He is the son of Joahaz. Elisha is still the prophet. Then we get Jeroboam II, has a 29-year reign. He's the son of Joash, and Amos, Hosea, and Jonah are the prophets that are in place. Zechariah has a 6-month reign. He is a son of Jeroboam II. Amos, Hosea, and Jonah are the prophets. Shallum has a 30-day reign. Shallum was a friend, a so-called friend of Zechariah, who murders him and takes the throne away. And the prophets are Amos, Hosea, and Jonah. Menahem has a 10-year reign. He's an army general of Zechariah, okay, who rises up and kills Shalom, right? And so then we've got Amos, Hosea, and Jonah as the prophets. Pekahiah, the son of Menahem, has a 2-year reign. Amos, Hosea, and Jonah are the prophets. Pekah has a 20-year reign. He is another captain. So again, we see this family killed out, right? And he reigns for 20 years. He's a captain. Amos, Hosea, and Jonah are the prophets. Then we get the very last one, the 19th one, Hoshea, who has a 9-year reign. He's a friendly assassin. I put that there because he was a friend of Pekah who assassinates him. And the prophet is Nahum. Okay. I know that was a lot of detail, and it can be hard to stick through with that, but let's now try and look at some other things around all this. All right. So we're going to be talking about chapters 13 and 14 next, and we've got death and deception and death, Jeroboam and his family, and are reigning in Israel, and Rehoboam reigning in Yehuda. And I wanted to mention one thing about these 19 kings of Israel. I was looking in E.W. Bullinger's book, A Number in Scripture, on page 188. He says, 19 is a number not without significance. It is a combination of 10 and 9 and would denote the perfection of divine order connected with judgment. It is also the gematria of the name Eve and of the name Job. From the split of the two houses in the northern house, there were 19 kings, including Jeroboam, from the split to the captivity by Assyria. The house of Yehuda had 20 kings. When we add Shaul, David, and Solomon, it gets us to the place of 45 kings before it's done. I find that significant considering we're in the year, depending on how you count our presidents. One of them like had a double rule, and sometimes he gets counted twice, sometimes only once. But it looks like we're in, president number 40, 45, could be number 44, depending on how you count it. But I just find that very interesting. These numbers are just not without significance. So I just wanted to mention that. The reason that I'm studying this out, I see huge connections to where we are as the people of Yasharel and what happened to our ancestors. And there's lots of lessons for us to learn. So I'm trying to dig through and look for these lessons. And I see a lot of correspondence to the place of Samaria, which is what the house of Israel ended up being their center for worship and rulership. And I see so many connections with the United States of America, with our judgment, with our judicial system, with our leadership system, with our prosperity, with just all kinds of things. All right, so we'll kind of get into that a little bit as we go on. Okay, chapter 13. Here's what I found. Yah sends a warning through a prophet to Jeroboam, a disobedient prophet. This is an interesting story, and one of my favorite Torah teachers of all time, the late Brad Scott, always said, if it's weird, pay attention. A man from the tribe of Yehuda has a true prophetic gift from Yah, and this would be Yadon. Okay, he hears the directives of Yah. He does the first part of what he heard, which is to deliver a message to Jeroboam, king of Israel. The word that his pagan altar would split apart. The king literally points his finger at him, commanding that he be seized for speaking against the altar. And his hand, the king's hand, immediately freezes up and is paralyzed, right? And it's stuck in that crippled position. And at that moment, a wide crack appears in the altar. The king then begs that same prophet to pray to his Elohim for him, and his hand is restored. He's offered a reward, and he refuses, stating in verse 9 that Elohim has warned him not to eat or drink anything while he is in Bethel and to travel home by a different route. He begins his return journey out of Bethel, but then, despite a strict warning from Yah, which he speaks himself twice in the story, right? He allows another man that we find out is a lying prophet that has a true prophetic gift to sway him off course, and it cost him his life. The other prophet did it on purpose because he was concerned about competition. And then he regrets it and mourns the other prophet's death. And so it's really interesting then digging a little further into this story. So I decided I was going to go to Josephus and read. So I'm reading out of this Sefer edition of Josephus. I'm going to remove this for a moment so that I can read the story to you guys, because it's really interesting. So this story is in chapter 9. It's called Book 8, chapter 9 of this book of Josephus. And the title of it says, How Yadon the prophet was persuaded by another lying prophet and returned to Bethel and was afterwards slain by a lion, as also what words the wicked prophet made use of to persuade the king, and thereby alienated his mind from Elohim. Everything we've been talking about lately. What are you listening to? This is what Lee's Mercy Poured Forth was about this word, the sound. What are you giving your ear to? And this is what's in this story. So it's amazing that y'all had this on my plate today and had that on her heart this morning. It all just flows together when we're all doing what he wants us to do, speaking the words he wants us to say, and just sticking to that. Right? All right, so let me read it to you. Now there was a wicked man in that city who was a false prophet, whom Yaravam, which would be Jeroboam, okay, had in great esteem. Okay, so Jeroboam really liked this guy because this guy tickled his ears. He said what he wanted him to say, but was deceived by him and his flattering words. You know what it means? He used the deception of flattery to wrap Jeroboam, the king, around his little finger. He was manipulative. He was a lying, manipulative man with a prophetic gift. God knits each of us together in the womb. He decides what giftings we're going to have. And then we have free will. And we use that free will to decide what our character is going to be. We can use his giftings any way we want. We can use them to sing a gospel song, or we can go get ourselves on American Idol and turn into Taylor Swift. You know, she started as a gospel singer in the church. Look at her now, promoting absolute wickedness. She had a gift. She used it for Yah at first, and then decided that she liked what was shining and glittering and what this world had to offer her. And so she embraced that with everything she's got and is leading thousands and thousands, if not millions of people astray by her music. She's using her gift to lead millions to the very depths of hell. Wow. It's up to us how we use those gifts. Okay. So back to our story here. So he was deceived. So the king, Jeroboam, was deceived by him and his flattering words. This man was bedridden by reason of the infirmities of old age. However, he was informed by his sons concerning the prophet who had come from Jerusalem and concerning the signs done by him, and how when Jeroboam's right hand had been enfeebled at the prophet's prayer, he had it revived again. Whereupon he was afraid that this stranger and prophet should be in better esteem with the king than himself, and obtain greater honor from him. So what was driving him? Jealousy, competition, making sure he kept his position, right? That he wanted to be the only one in the king's ear. Okay? Because was the king really in charge? Or was this wicked lying prophet in charge? And this is the same thing we have to ask ourselves today when we see who is up front and in our face and the figurehead. Who's behind them? Who's really pulling their strings? Who's using their flattery, to manipulate things the way they want them to go? Most of the times we don't even know that person's name, but they hold great influence. So he gave orders to his sons, this wicked prophet, to saddle his ass presently and make all ready that he might go out. Accordingly, so he's bedridden, but he is so concerned that he drags his butt out of bed and gets on this donkey to go pursue this prophet to make sure he puts an end to this mess. Right? So accordingly, they made haste to do what they were commanded, and he got upon the ass and followed the prophet. When he'd overtaken him as he was resting himself under a very large oak tree that was thick and shady, he at first saluted him, but presently he complained of him because he had not come into his house and partaken of his hospitality. Can you see, can you just hear this conversation? So you know that this lying, wicked prophet full of flattery says, oh, I heard you came to the king and wow, what a powerful word you spoke. But, oh, I'm so disappointed. I'm a prophet like you, and you didn't bother to come and have fellowship with me and allow me to extend you hospitality. Wicked, manipulative flattery. That's how it works. Okay. I have to look. Um, y'all are on the same frequency. We are, aren't we? We are. And then my friend Lee saying, yep, well, it's funny. It's really funny how we all end up on the same word to bring. We asked the Father to speak his words through us today. I wasn't sure what he was going to say. It happens to us a lot, doesn't it? And then my friend Warwell is saying, um, yep, Yahweh's orchestration of his message to us is astounding. He makes sure that his hand is obvious so that he receives all the glory. That's what it is. That's exactly what it is. All right. I love being a nobody in his kingdom. He can do anything he wants with us, right? Okay. All right. So he was complaining that he didn't come take his hospitality. So, and when the other said that Elohim had forbidden him to taste of anyone's provision in that city, he replied, for certain, Elohim had not forbidden that I should set food before you, for I'm a prophet as you are, and worship Elohim in the same manner that you do. I have now come as sent by him in order to bring you into my house and make you my guest. Now Yadon gave credit to this lying prophet. He listened to this flattery. Don't think that you can't be deceived by it. It's very deceptive. Okay. We have to be so sharp, right? Because this lying, deceptive spirit, and it's operating as someone who is in the house with the same kind of gifts, serving the same Elohim. Wow. It's happening today. It's happening now. And we've got to know this, right? All right. So Yadon gave credit to this lying prophet and returned with him. But when they were at dinner and merry together, Elohim appeared to Yadon. Look, Elohim appears to them. He appears to Yadon and said that he should suffer punishment for transgressing his commands. He told him that the punishment would be that he should meet with a lion as he was going on his way. That the punishment, by which lion he should be torn in pieces and be deprived of burial in the sepulchres of his fathers. These things came to pass, as I suppose, according to the will of Elohim, so that Yaravam might not give heed to the words of Yadon as of one who had been convicted of lying. However, as Yadon was again going to Jerusalem, a lion assaulted him, pulled him off the beast he rode, and slew him. Yet did he not at all hurt the ass, but sat by him and kept him, as also the prophet's body. This continued till some travelers who saw it came and told it in the city to the false prophet. He sent his sons, brought the body into the city, and made a funeral for him at great expense. He also charged his sons to bury himself with him and said that all which he had foretold against that city and the altar and priests and false prophets would prove true. So now, this lying prophet getting a true word also, right? He said, if he were buried with him, he should receive no injurious treatment after his death, the bones not being then to be distinguished asunder. This is why the prophet says, bury him in my grave. He's saying, after we both decay, the bones will be all mixed together, and y'all won't know which bones were this good prophet and which bones are mine, and so I won't suffer eternal punishment. As if the creator of those bones doesn't know the difference. Always, this is how the mind of the wicked works. This is the whole thing with this not just transgenderism, but transhumanism, right? That they are thinking that they can somehow usurp what, get around, go find a workaround around what Yah says. You can't find a workaround. I'm sorry. No matter what wickedness you come up with, no matter how many genes you splice, no matter how many tomatoes you violate, you're not coming up with workarounds. It's not going to happen. Yah's going to have his way, and you can't just think you're going to mix up your bones with somebody else's and then you won't be held accountable. Doesn't work that way. All right. Let me continue with what Josephus said. But now, when he had performed those funeral rites to the prophet and had given that charge to his sons, as he was a wicked and an impious man, he went to Jeroboam, King Jeroboam, and he said to him, "And wherefore is it now that you are disturbed at the words of this silly fellow?" Right? When the king had related to him what had happened about the altar and about his own hand, and gave him the names of a divine man and an excellent prophet, he endeavored by a wicked trick to weaken his opinion. See, he's using deceit to influence the king. All right? This is what happens. By using plausible words, right? Reasoning. Well, don't you trust the science? Don't think about these silly people that are saying that it's harmful. Don't you trust the science? All right. So by using plausible words concerning what had happened, he aimed to injure the truth that was in them. For he attempted to persuade him that his hand was enfeebled by the labor it had undergone in supporting the sacrifices, and that upon its resting a while, it returned to its former nature again. Look at that. He's like, he didn't work a miracle on your hand. Your hand was just tired. You'd been working, getting the sacrifices ready for the altar. We let those muscles rest, and they just went right back into shape. That wasn't a miracle. That wasn't Yah. They reasoned it away. As to the altar, it was but new and had borne an abundance of sacrifices, and those large ones too, and was accordingly broken to pieces and fallen down by the weight of what had been laid upon it. That wasn't a miracle of Yah. That wasn't Yah speaking. No, there's a plausible explanation for that. Science proves it out. All right. He also informed him of the death of him who had foretold those things and how he perished, right? See, the disobedience cost not just his life, but the plausibility of his message. This is why it's so important for us to be obedient. Whereby he concluded that he had not anything in him of a prophet, nor spoke anything like one. When he had thus spoken, he persuaded the king, entirely alienated his mind, alienated the king's mind from Elohim, from doing works that were righteous and holy, and encouraged him to go on in his impious practices. Accordingly, he was to that degree injurious to Elohim, and so great a transgressor that he sought for nothing else every day but how he might be guilty of some new instances of wickedness, and such as should be more detestable than what he had been so insolent as to do before. So much shall at present suffice to have said concerning Yerovam or Jeroboam. All right, let me add this back to the screen and go to my next slide. Okay, so this brings us to the question. Are we talking the talk or walking the walk? Who's actually living in the way Mashiach told us to? Yahusha examines trees. I'm thinking about the fig tree, right? He examines the trees, not just for leaves. The wind's blowing and roaring, right? And the leaves are making all kinds of noise. Woohoo! Having a hallelujah party. Reminds me of charismatic services I've been in, right? Lots of noise going on. All right. But does the tree have any fruit? As a farmer, if I have a tree on my land, and this was a quote from Bill Cloud from one of his teaching series, and he had said this, that as a farmer, if he has a tree on his lot that year after year will not produce fruit, that he's going to remove it from the land and put something in its place that will produce fruit. Okay, all part of the land, one of the trees, which is representative of Yah's people, but one that refuses to produce fruit. He's no longer going to allow it to stay there and continuing taking up the nutrients of the soil and not bearing any fruit, not giving anything back, not fulfilling its purpose. Instead, what's he going to do? He's going to go out, he's going to rip that tree right out of the ground, and he's going to plant a different plant in it that will grow, right? Also in Matthew 5:13, we're told, ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and to be trodden under the foot of men. Right? That's what happens to salt that has lost its flavor. It's mixed with other things and it's lost its pure flavor of being salt. So what is it good for? It's good for nothing but throwing on the ground and melting snow, right? That's what it'll be good for at that point, okay? Where men just trod over it, right? We have a job to do, and there are those in the house that are insisting right now on doing their thing instead of doing Yah's thing. He eventually defines them as lazy, wicked, and as having no fruit and no flavor, right? We don't want to be that. In Matthew 18:21 through 28, we've got another example of this, right? So it says, then Kepha came to him and said, Adonai, how oft shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Till 7 times? Yahusha said unto him, I say not unto you until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. Therefore is the kingdom of heaven likened unto a certain king, which would take account of his servants. And when he had begun to reckon, one was brought unto him, which owed him 10,000 talents. But for as much as he had not to pay, his Adonai commanded him to be sold, and his woman, and children, and all that he had, and payment to be made. The servant therefore fell down and worshipped him, saying, Adonai, have patience with me, and I will pay you all. Then the Adonai of that servant was moved with compassion and loosed him and forgave him the debt. But the same servant, right? Compassion preceded the miracle of release from that debt that he couldn't pay. We see it in every miracle of Yahuwah. Compassion precedes the miracle of release from whatever the situation is. Okay? It's the same way as we work in his kingdom. This is why to be truly effective in his kingdom, we have to have his fruit flowing and being produced in our lives. Because if we want to be effective in his kingdom, compassion for our fellow brothers and sisters is the number one requirement for being an effective servant of the king, for flowing in his power from on high. If you don't have compassion, you may be flowing in a gift, but it's not a gift from him. or you may have gotten that gift, but it's not going to have his character or his result or his fruit. Real miracles, lasting change, flowing from those of us that are his ambassadors on the earth as he flows through us as an empty vessel, a conduit for his power. If we're not of that same like nature and ability of having compassion, forget it. It's not going to happen. All right. So look for that as you're looking for things and you're looking between, seeing what is the fruit of this ministry or this ministry or this ministry or this, let's look for these things and say, do we see compassion? All right. All right. So, but the same servant went out and found one of his fellow servants, which owed him 100 pence, and he laid hands on him, right? He took him by the throat, saying, pay me what you owe me. All right. Oh man, that's what happens. And his fellow servant fell down at his feet and besought him, saying, have patience with me, and I will pay you all. And he would not, but he went and cast him into prison till he should pay the debt. So when his fellow servants saw what was done, they were very sorry, and came and told unto their Adonai all that was done. Then his Adonai, after that he had called him, said unto him, oh, you wicked servant. Look, he's a servant in the house of Yah. Okay. He is a servant. He's considered a servant. He's a wicked servant, but he's a servant. He's in the house. He's not outside of the house. He's not in the nations. He's a servant in the house. This is so important to understand. So after his Adonai, after that, he called him and he said, oh, you wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt, right? You came to me. I set you free. I cleansed your plate because you asked me to. You desired me. Should not you also have had compassion on your fellow servant, even as I had pity on you? And his Adonai was wroth and delivered him to the tormentors till he should pay all that was due unto him. So likewise shall my heavenly Father do also unto you, if ye from your hearts forgive not everyone his brother their transgressions. What a warning. Okay. Okay, here's another one. I really got stuck on this. It's in Matthew 25, verses 24 through 30. It says, then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Adonai, I knew that you are a hard man, reaping where you have not sown and gathering where you have not strawed. And I was afraid, and I went and I hid your talent in the earth. Lo, there, you have that which is yours. He's like, here it is. You gave it to me. I knew how harsh and mean you are, Yah. So I just took it and I hid it here. Just let me give it back to you. Can you imagine? His Adonai answered and said unto him, you wicked and slothful servant. All right. This is a servant in the house of Elohim. All right. This is the example. All right. You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I sowed not and gather where I have not strawed. You ought therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received my own with usury. Take therefore the talent from him and give it unto him which has 10 talents. For unto everyone that has shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that has not, what did he not have? He had no faith in Yah. He did not trust Yah. He was a servant in the house that did not trust the master. All right. But from him that has not shall be taken away even that which he had, which he has. And cast ye the unprofitable servant. All right. What was this servant not doing? He was not producing fruit. Therefore, he was unprofitable. Okay. Cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. All right, let's go on to the next one. All right, so I kind of got now to chapter 14. All right, So let's look at this. In chapter 14, what do we see happening? Jeroboam has a son named Abijah, and he is sick. So he commands his wife to disguise herself and go to the true prophet Ahijah, and she is told her son will die because he is the only good thing of his father's house, the only good thing that'll ever come from his father's house, the only good thing out of the whole family is what he's told, right? So I just found it interesting that these two names were so similar, this son of Jeroboam that dies and the prophet that delivers the word, right? So we've got Aviyah, the son, and we've got Ahijah, the prophet. So I was looking at the pictograph and the Hebrew and the Brown Driver Briggs, and Brown Driver Briggs says that this name Aviyah, it means Yah is my father, because the word Avi is father, and we've got Yah as his name. So Aviyah, Yah is my father. Okay. The pictograph, we've got the very first leader, right? Which I always see Yah, the strength, the leader, the ox head, number one, right? Number one, it's in every other number, but no other numbers in it. He is Echad, right? So I see that there. And then we've got the house, the picture of the house, the inner life, the family, right? The genome, the place where all that the relationships are built. So we've got and then it's a the yod, which is working, the right hand that's working, and then we've got the man standing there amazed and praising, right, with the hay. So what I got out of the pictograph, it is the first leader of the house whose works I behold. Well, if that's your name, that Yah is my father, it would be that you're beholding him, right? That makes it matches up, the pictograph and the explanation from scholars in the Brown Driver Biggs, it matches together. Yes, that's who we're beholding. Okay, now here's the prophet Ahijah. So we've got an aleph, a het, a yod, and a hey. The Brown Driver Briggs says, I am the brother of Yah. Okay, so Ahi, we've got the name brother right there. Okay, so the pictograph, so if you're a brother of Yah, you're in the family, right? And I got from the pictograph, it is the first leader, the ox head, right? The het is a separation, it's a fence, it's a wall, it's a division. It is the first leader who separates my works, my deeds, my life's efforts. And with that, it causes me to behold him because I'm putting all my effort as separated unto him. And this is what that prophet was doing as a brother of Yah. So that made a lot of sense to me when I looked at it. Now, I did find one other thing in this story about when Jeroboam is sick and he commands her wife to go and visit the prophet. I thought this was really interesting. Let me see. In here, this is in Josephus, chapter 10, looking at the section 2. It says, now I cannot but think that the greatness of a kingdom and its change into prosperity often becomes the occasion of mischief and transgression to men. Okay, so it's dealing with a prosperous kingdom and how it leads to mischief. Interesting. For when Rehoboam saw that his kingdom had so much increased, he went out of the right way unto righteousness and unobservant practices, and he despised the worship of Elohim. He despised the worship of Elohim till the people themselves imitated his wicked actions. Now listen to this and think about the United States of America and what's happening right now in our country. So it usually happens that the manners of subjects are corrupted at the same time with those of their governors, which subjects then lay aside their sober way of living as a reproof of their governors' intemperate courses, and follow their wickedness as if it were a virtue, right? Calling sweet bitter and bitter sweet, calling good evil and evil good. Isn't that what we're seeing? For it is not possible to show that men approve of the actions of their kings unless they do the same actions with them, right? Oh, we're in this together. Did you remember this coming out? This was the slogan that came out at 2020 when all hell was unleashed on the world, right? Every commercial encouraging us to follow the way that the leaders were saying was the way to go and take every directive from them, or else you weren't good citizens, right? And everything, every commercial was, we're in this together. Break down that word, to get her. Who is the evil trying to eradicate? They cannot get to Yahusha. Who is their object to destroy? His bride. To get her. We're in this together. To get her. That's what's been going on. It's still going on. And get ready. Buckle up, Buttercup, because more's on its way. All right? That's why we got to be strong. Okay, let me go on. My teaching's long enough without getting too sidetracked. All right. Okay, so now I am in 1 Kings 14:14, and let's read just a little bit here. In addition, Yahweh will raise up a king over Israel who will destroy the family of Jeroboam. This will happen today, even now. Then Yahweh will shake Israel like a reed whipped about in a stream. He will uproot the people of Israel from this good land that he gave their ancestors and will scatter them beyond the Euphrates River, for they have angered Yahweh with the Asherah poles they have set up for worship. He will abandon Israel because Jeroboam sinned and made Israel sin along with him. So let's just look. Do we have these Asherah poles still in what I believe were the biggest portion, one of the biggest portions of the northern tribes has landed in this country of United States of America, and in all of the UK and in Australia? We have this all over, right? This is in all the nations. Let's look at it. Lee and James had this great picture of the ancient Asherah pole shaped just like our Christmas tree. Here it is right there, all lit up with another Asherah pole off to the side, right? Jeremiah 10:2-4, right? Setting it up. We're not to do it. Now look at our main houses of worship that are here in these different countries. You always see it with the steeple. It's an obelisk. It's an Asherah pole. Here's the shadow of Egypt. Look at the architecture right there. It's in all of our buildings. Here's the sun god worship, the wreath, all the different things right there. It's all right in plain sight. Absolutely, Lee. It most certainly is. And it's a disgusting practice, because when you look at the graphic of what this thing is, I mean, you're literally sticking a big male organ on top of your place of worship. No wonder we were told to, our leaders were told to get rid of them. It's disgusting. All right. So right now, I believe we are living in the time where he's going to shake everything that can be shaken, and it includes every tradition. And so I know that will be offensive to many, and I'm sorry that it offends you, but yet I'm not sorry it offends you. It should offend you, because it's time to wake up and call a spade, because you can avoid reality all you want. You just can't avoid the consequences of reality. Okay. So sticking our head in the sand and saying, well, it doesn't mean that to me in my heart, whatever. Try getting away with that one, because no one in our history ever got away with it. And we're not going to get away with it either. And it's time to wake up and smell the coffee and get away from this stuff. We're in a shaking time, and everything is about to be shaken that can be shaken. And I pray that this word is offensive enough that it wakes somebody up to say, you know what? I hate what she said, but it was right. And I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to offend Yah anymore. Right? There it is. There it is. My friend Wirewool, that is it. She says, you're weighed in the balances and found wanting. Daniel 5:27. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So I wanted to read a little bit out of this book. It's called These Sought a Country. Let me see if I can get it in there. It's by the late Robert L. Cate. Very, very interesting. He was a Baptist theologian that I find a lot of his commentaries extremely interesting. So I wanted to read you just a little bit. I'm going to remove my screen so I can read. Thank you guys for sticking with me. I know this is a long thing and it's prep day. And even if you have to leave and maybe come back and watch it later, whatever, I'm just grateful you're here with me. I appreciate you. I thank you, Asia. Good to see you today. Glad you're here. I understand we've all got busy schedules and maybe we pop in, pop out and do the best we can, but I'm excited to bring this to you today because I think it's a good study. All right, so I'm reading you a little section out of this. It's called, it's chapter 6. It's called Division and Destruction, Judah and Israel to the Fall of Samaria. And I'm only reading you a little bit out of it because it's so pertinent to what we're looking at. So it says, following the death of Solomon, the entire kingdom appeared to collapse. The major territorial conquest of David's reign and the great administrative accomplishments of Solomon seemed about to disappear. You know, you wonder if that's what he saw coming in Ecclesiastes when he said, everything's vanity, everything's vanity. He was just looking, and it's all, that he probably had some foresight because he was wise and could see it's all just going to fall into dust, right? Okay, the question immediately arises as to why this dissolution came and why it came so quickly. In viewing the period of the United Kingdom, 4 features stand out which appear to have a bearing on our answer to this question. Fundamental in importance is the fact that the kingdom was apparently never united by a truly common national allegiance among the people of Israel. The primary allegiance of the people always seemed to have been tribal or at best regional, but not national. The only thing which had really held them together as a nation was a common enemy and the strong personality of the king. When this was lost, all else began to fall apart. A second feature of significance is the attitude of David and Solomon toward the faith of Israel. David at least acknowledged that he was responsible to obey the will of God. He accepted the rebuke of the prophet Nathan with a simple confession of sin. Solomon, on the other hand, in turning to the worship of the gods of his wives, had begun to alienate the prophets. He appears to have felt above the law. The third feature is somewhat similar, for it is found in the differences of the attitudes of David and Solomon toward their people. David seems to have sought to serve the people fairly and with honor. Remember what we were talking about. He had the true servant's heart. He had compassion towards them. Solomon, on the other hand, seems to have felt the people were little more than servants for himself. Right? He did not have the example of Yahusha to want to follow, to want to wash people's feet and be the biggest servant of all. He thought everybody was there for him, right? He was a narcissist. With the With the massive conscriptions of labor battalions to construct far-flung building products, he seriously infringed upon the freedom of the people. This created major unrest among those who had no common tribal allegiance with him. Furthermore, in setting up the administrative districts of the land, Solomon sought to destroy the old tribal allegiances. This too was quite unpopular. The fourth item, which appears to have had a bearing upon the dissolution of the kingdom, was the building of the temple itself. For the first time, there was a major central sanctuary for the worship of Israel. This in itself drew the people of the land toward an ultimate allegiance to the city of David, for that was where the temple was located. Tribal leaders of the north, who sought to maintain tribal allegiances as primary in Israel, knew that the attraction of the temple would or might quickly destroy the more localized allegiances of the people. If this were going to be prevented, it had to be done quickly. Those features all coming together at a point following the death of Solomon set the stage for the division of the kingdom that had apparently been firmly established by David. The unity of the kingdom was superficial only. With the death of Solomon, it all fell apart. Now it gets into something I really find very, very interesting. Oh, that's so funny. Betty's saying, took you with me to the kitchen. And Werewolf saying, at Betty King, I call it cooking with Chelle. Thank you. I am more than happy to keep you something to listen to while you guys cook and get things ready and done. I've got my meat defrosting on the counter right now, so I'll be ready to get my Shabbat stuff in order too. Y'all are so funny. All righty. Okay, so the sources for study in this book. Okay, so in comparison with the earlier periods of Hebrew history, when we get into the area of the divided kingdoms, we have an abundance of riches insofar as sources are concerned. As usual, however, the primary sources are still those of the Bible. The basic biblical materials are found in 1 Kings 12:1 to 2 Kings 17:41 and in 2 Chronicles 10:1 to 28:27. This is really important, what I'm about to tell you. We must be aware, however, that the material in Chronicles follows the history of Judah only, dealing with Israel only where they came in contact with Judah. In addition to these sources, the lives and ministries of Amos, Hosea, Isaiah, and Micah all came in the final years of this period. There's a great deal of information to be gleaned from the books bearing those names for understanding much of what was going on in both the North and South. It is important to be aware that the authors of Kings and Chronicles were also using more basic sources. You know, we're dealing with a period of history that was 3,000 years ago, right? They had history books available to them as this was being written down, and they had those sources that we don't have today. And so this is what it's pointing out. It's saying among those used in Kings, okay, are the book of Chronicles of the kings of Israel and the book of Chronicles of the kings of Judah. These are not to be confused with the biblical books of Chronicles. Instead, they actually appear to have been the official court records of the two kingdoms. The chronicler also cited a source called the Commentary on the Book of the Kings. You find that reference in 2 Chronicles 24:27. In addition to the sources which these works cite, it is clear that both Kings and Chronicles used other ancient sources. Chronicles clearly quotes from numerous biblical books, and both appear to have used other materials which they do not cite. If you are interested in pursuing this subject further, you may wish to refer to the Broadman Bible Commentary number 3 or any other good critical commentary. So I just thought that was really interesting because I've always wondered what that was, because it didn't make sense to me with, it mentioning the book of the Chronicles. And I was like, well, I'm not seeing more information in there. So that's why. Okay. Now, okay, let me add this back to the screen. Okay, so in chapter 15, Aviyam, Asa are the kings that reign in Yehuda. Nadab and Baasha reign in Israel. So let's just look at a passage here out of 1 Kings 15, starting in verse 1. Abijam began to rule over Judah in the 18th year of Jeroboam's reign in Israel. He reigned in Jerusalem 3 years. His mother was Maacah, the granddaughter of Absalom. He committed the same sins as his father before him, and he was not faithful to Yahweh his Elohim, as his ancestor David had been. But for David's sake, Yahweh his Elohim allowed his descendants to continue ruling, shining like a lamp. And he gave Abijam a son to rule after him in Jerusalem. For David had done what was pleasing in Yahweh's sight and had obeyed Yahweh's commands throughout his life, except in the affair concerning Uriah the Hittite. I mean, isn't that an amazing story of redemption? Because, wow, when David messed up, he messed up big, and it caused all kinds of consequences in his family throughout his life. But you can see that his heart was restored and his relationship with Yah was restored, right? Amazing. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay, so Asa is the next leader of the southern kingdom. He is a righteous king. He rules approximately 41 years. In verse 12, we are told that he banished the temple prostitutes. He stopped the sodomy and got rid of all the idols his ancestors had made. So let's just read a little bit about that. 1 Kings 15, 11 through 14. And Asa did that which was right in the eyes of Yahweh, as did David his father. And he took away the sodomim out of the land and removed all the idols that his fathers had made. And also Maacah, his mother, even her, he removed from being queen because she had made an idolatrous Asherah pole. And Asa destroyed her idol and burned it by the brook of Kidron. But the high places were not removed. Nevertheless, Asa's heart was perfect with Yahweh all his days. So Asa makes a treaty with the king of Aram. Now, who was that? Aram, remember, is the land of Ur, right? This was the land that Nimrod was in, the land Abraham was called to leave because Abraham's father, Terach, worked directly for Nimrod. Okay, this was the place of Lavan, of Rivkah, okay, where, Yaakov sent to go find a wife, where the servant Eleazar of Abraham is sent to find Rivkah a wife for Isaac, right? So meanwhile, in the northern kingdom, an exceeding wicked man named Baasha from the tribe of Issachar murders his way to the throne and rules for approximately 24 years. Okay. All right. So now we're looking in chapter 16, the evil kings, Baasha, Elah, his son, Zimri, the murderer who lasted 7 days, Omri, the army captain who is elected king by the army, and Ahab, his son, who marries Jezebel. This is where we get through how much territory is covered in chapter 16. Okay, so a common theme throughout all of this, through Kings, is the dogs and the vultures lick up the blood, eat the flesh of the wicked kings and their families. All right, so I wanted to just look at a little bit of symbolism. What in the world is that about with the dog and the vultures, right? So where I went for this was a book called Old Testament Word Studies, done by, it's just got Wilson's as the author's name, okay? So I looked it up. Dog is Caleb. All right. We've got a Kuf, a Lamed, and a uh, bet. I knew I'd get it out. All right. So here's what his commentary had to say. A dog so called from barking. All right. Because apparently that word kind of means barking. All right. So among the Hebrews, dogs were kept to guard houses and flocks. To me, I mean, I have a dog. That's why I keep my dog, because she's a good companion and she keeps my chickens safe and she guards against anybody coming into the house, right? That's why most of us would have a dog, right? But throughout the East, they are mostly without masters and they wander. They're half famished, right? And they're fierce. They travel in troops around the cities and villages, where and this is why dogs is often an appellation, right? A type, a figure for something that is a fierce or a cruel enemy. So we've got a picture here. We've got a symbolism picture. Why is it that the dogs are going to lick it up? It's a fierce, cruel enemy. You're going to be dealt with by something fierce and cruel, is what's being said. So the vulture, I found 3 different Hebrew words. It didn't really give me a good translation, I guess, to say. I can do my best. Ayah, da, 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 ya. Okay, so that's what it had in the book. But I loved his description and of what this pictograph gives us, what this picture of this vulture, this unclean bird, right? It's an unclean bird. It can be a vulture, a kite, or a falcon. It's a ravenous bird that is swift of flight, a bird of prey that inhabits ruins. Okay, so when you think about that, they inhabit the dead places. It's something that hovers above, right? Looking for what they can feed on that's already dead. Okay. Wow. Zimri destroys Baasha and Allah. They reign, and then their reign. Zimri destroys their reign. It looks like they were ruling like together, and then Zimri comes in and obviously murders Allah. And then 7 days later, he burns down the palace over his own head. He committed suicide, literally in fear, because Omri was approaching. Okay, so that's what we see there. So in Isaiah 56, 9 through 12, I wanted to go back to this thing about the dogs and the vultures because I found it in here and I found it interesting. It says, "Come, wild animals of the field, come, wild animals of the forest, come and devour my people." He's not talking about somebody outside of the house. He's talking about his people. This is Yah, the prophetic voice of Yah, coming forth, calling forth dogs and vultures to deal with the rebellious people that have decided to follow wickedness that are of his house, right? Come and devour my people. For the leaders of my people, Yahweh's watchmen, his shepherds, are blind and ignorant. They are like silent watchdogs that give no warning when danger comes. They love to lie around sleeping and dreaming. Like greedy dogs, they are never satisfied. They are ignorant shepherds, all following their own path and intent on personal gain. Come, they say, let's get some wine and have a party. Let's just all get drunk. Then tomorrow we'll do it again and have an even bigger party. That's some pretty bad leadership. and Yah knows it. Here's another example. Jeremiah 15, 1 through 4. It says, Then Yahweh said to me, even if Moses and Samuel stood before me pleading for these people, I wouldn't help them. Away with them. Get them out of my sight. And if they say to you, but where can we go? Tell them, this is what Yahweh says. Those who are destined for death to death, those who are destined for war to war, those who are destined for famine to famine, and those who are destined for captivity to captivity. I will send 4 kinds of destroyers against them, says Yahweh. I will send the sword to kill, the dogs to drag away, the vultures to devour, and the wild animals to finish up what is left. Because of the wicked things Manasseh, son of Hezekiah, king of Yehuda, did in Jerusalem, I will make my people an object of horror to all the kingdoms of the earth. So sad when Yah's people will not follow him. So Omri, the father of Ahab, rules in Israel. There is a split within Israel, and it takes place over who the leader should be. The opposition is killed and the decision is made. Omri is king. Samaria is established as a principal city because Omri purchases it. We definitely see the same atmosphere that was displayed when Rome fell, and we're witnessing the same as the USA dies a slow death. Look what's going on right now in the election of the Speaker of the House. Now, nothing can get done till they make a decision on this, right? And yet they can't decide, and they had, I don't know if I know that they resumed at 12 o'clock today. I haven't looked because I started doing this broadcast when they resumed. So I have no idea if they've come up with a solution to elect a Speaker of the House yet or not, because we've been here. But I was reading this article yesterday, and I put the where I got it from. I'll try to remember to go back and add the link. It's called The Decline of Empire, The Parallels Between the U.S. and Rome, Part 1. It's by a magazine or an online magazine called The Burning Platform. So I just wanted to read a little bit about this because it's exactly what we're seeing. And actually, the next place that I'm going in the book of Obadiah in this study, we're going to see the connections between Esau, Edom, Rome, the United States, what's been set up for government in the system, and the mighty men, the Gibborim. It'll be really interesting. I'm going to be using a lot of notes out of Dr. Laura Sanger's book called The Roots of the Federal Reserve. And actually, I can go ahead and announce at this point that I have an interview with Dr. Laura Sanger coming up. Not until May 3rd, but the interview is not just with her, it's with her and Dr. Monzo. The two of them wanted to have a discussion, and Heart of the Tribes is going to be the platform where they do that, and I'm going to host that interview. So I am super excited about that. Ought to be fascinating. So unfortunately, we have to wait till May till we get there. But if the creek doesn't rise and the internet's still on and Jaws will, that'll go forth and it'll happen. Right. All right. So let me just read this one part about the from this article, and then I'm going to wrap up, and we'll be back later today. Lee and James and myself and Robert will be back for Friday Night Fellowship at 7 o'clock this evening. 7 o'clock p.m. EST. All right. Here's part of this article from the Burning Platform. There are good reasons for looking to Rome rather than any other civilization when trying to see where the U.S. is headed. Everyone knows Rome declined, but few people understand why. And I think even fewer realize that the U.S. is now well along the same path for pretty much the same reasons, which I'll explore shortly. Rome reached its peak of military power around the year 107, when Trajan completed the conquest of Dacia, the territory of modern Romania. With Dacia, the empire peaked in size, but I'd argue it was already past its peak by almost every other measure. The US reached its peak relative to the world, and in some ways its absolute peak as early as the 1950s. In 1950, this country produced 50% of the world's gross national product and 80% of its vehicles. Now we produce about 21% of the world's gross national product and about 5% of the vehicles. Wow, what a decline, huh? Continuing on in his article, it owned 2/3 of the world's gold reserves. Now it holds 1/4. It was by a huge margin the world's biggest creditor, whereas now it's the biggest debtor by a huge margin. The income of the average American was by far the highest in the world. Today it ranks about eighth, and it's slipping. But it's not just the US, it's Western civilization that's in decline. In 1910, Europe controlled almost the whole world, politically, financially, and militarily. Now it's becoming a Disneyland with real buildings and a petting zoo for the Chinese. It's even further down the slippery slope than the United States. Like America, Rome was founded by refugees from Troy, at least in myth. Like America, it was ruled by kings in its early history. Later, Romans became self-governing with several assemblies and a senate. Later still, power devolved to the executive, which was likely not an accident. U.S. founders modeled the country on Rome, all the way down to the architecture of government buildings, the use of the eagle as the national bird, the use of Latin mottos, and the unfortunate use of the fasces, the axe surrounded by the rods, as a symbol of state power. Publius, the pseudonymous author of the Federalist Papers, took his name from one of Rome's first councils. As it was in Rome, military prowess is at the center of the national identity of the United States. When you adopt a model in earnest, you grow to resemble it. Isn't that true? All right, so now just to finish up this chapter, this is my last little thing. It says in chapter 16, we see that Ahab had become the ruler of Israel with his despicable wife Jezebel at his side. Elijah is the prophet that Yah has called to deal with the evil at this time on the earth. So his father Omri had purchased the hill called Samaria. It must have been like a mountain, right? It was owned by a man named Shemer. Okay. And so Omri pushes it, and this Samaria becomes huge. It becomes the capital of the northern kingdom, right? All right, so we have to take a look at this. So Shemer was the man's name who bought it. So I put it here just in the pictograph. We've got a Shin, a Mem, and a Resh. So I'm seeing more and more when we're talking about destruction and chaos, all right? We've got the Shin, we've got destruction going on. It's the teeth. It's what chews down the food into liquid. That's what it's a picture of. It destroys. It takes food and it destroys it. Okay, so we've got destruction. And then we've got the chaos of waters, the waves up and down and up and down. Chaotic. You never know what's going to happen next, right? They follow the path of least resistance. Okay, so then we've got the Resh. We've got the man, the mind. We've got man's mind, his thinking. This is also when we're talking about something being influenced by destruction and chaos. Well, where's that coming from? It's not coming from Yahusha. That's not the mind of Yahusha. So who would it be coming from except from the mind of the Gibborim, or the falling watchers? This is what's influencing the Gibborim. So right there in the name of the man who owned the place, we see a word picture of destruction, of chaos is coming from this place of the Gibborim. Now let's see if we can further that. The name is Samaria, or Shomron in the Hebrew. The Brown Driver Briggs just says this is Watch Mountain. Well, wait a minute here. Who's watching? The Watchers, right? Could this mean that this is a mountain of the Watchers, a high place? Well, we know it was a high place, right? That's what they were in trouble for all the time. So if I'm putting this word picture together, I'm looking at the Shin, the Mem, the Resh, the Vav, and the Noon. So a destruction of chaos is coming from the mighty men that are connected to this genome. They're trying to insert the genome of the Watchers, like, getting their cells into our cells. What's going on right now? This is what we're at. And this started way back in Shomron. All right. Well, that was what I had for you guys today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed it. Next time we come back, it'll be with part 5. And I'm sure we're going to go ahead and play the reading now that goes along with this. We can probably get that in between now and before we do Let's Talk Torah, so that you guys can hear that while you're cooking and preparing and working in the kitchen and getting ready for Shabbat. All right. Love you guys. Hope you have a blessed and wonderful Shabbat. Hope to see you all later this evening for Let's Talk Torah. And for now, I'm going to say shalom.
Day and night and day, the living creatures give their praise to Him who lives eternally. They never cease from saying, Holy, holy is Yahweh.